So what would it entail?
What we're doing is replacing the container.
Okay.
Because all the wiring and everything, all that stuff.
Top something on, top of that one on. Okay. Well, I guess if I guess the question is if you don't do it.
If I don't do it and your board breaks, you can't do it with the door out.
Okay. I'll talk to James. See what we can do this.
Unless we say something with our old boards, which we probably will. We probably won't throw them away, but.
Okay. How much does that cost? I guess is the question.
I guess it's probably going to be about
Right. That's what I was just wondering. So if you want us to just try and do both. I mean, if you think it's, you want, I can tell them let's do it. Okay. I mean, we can't James and see.
Because if it gets to the point where the new one.
Okay. And then you can use it for something else. Okay. I think it'd be a good idea to switch them out.
Well, good evening. It's 5 o'clock. Time to start our study session. Summer, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Blevins?
Here.
Commissioner Norwood?
Here.
Commissioner Siragusa?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts? Here. Commissioner Stallings?
Here.
Commissioner Orr?
Here.
Mayor Mason?
Here. Item number 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda. Does anyone have anything they want to talk about? Okay. If not, I'll go on to item number 3 on the study items, 3.1, legislative update. Kurt Rogo.
That was quick. All right. Well, it was an exciting session. You know, I usually give this report in June, and session just kind of kept on rolling through with special sessions and things like that. It just never stops. We used to get a nice little break in the summer, but it just keeps on rolling. So I'll kind of get into it. Let's see here. All right. So during the first session of the 59th legislature, which was this last spring, over 3,200 bills filed, which is, you know, 10, 15 years ago, it always used to be 2,000. Now we're always over 3,000 bills filed. 338 bills signed by the governor, 46 vetoed, and 19 veto overrides. So the governor actually was successful on a lot of his vetoes that they didn't revisit, which I thought was somewhat interesting. But then for the budget, the legislature did it in a special session. The reason they did that is just strategical, because in regular session, they have to end it on the last Friday of May, and the budget was getting close to the end of May, and if they were to pass the budget in that last week and then leave, the governor would get some pocket veto power on the budget. They didn't want to leave him with that pocket veto power, so they created a special session, and that's where the budget ended up. 93 bills filed, 52 became law without the governor's signature, which were a lot of the appropriations bills. 2 vetoes. Those were the tribal compact extensions. That has been the excitement that's been going on at the Capitol in the last 2 months, which ended yesterday. There were 2 overrides. It took a little while for the House and Senate to coordinate that just a bit, but that finally ended yesterday with the House finishing the Senate Bill 26 on the tobacco compact extension. And all those bills did was extend those tribal compacts for another year until the end of '24. The legislature, they didn't believe that the governor was maybe negotiating in good faith, maybe. The governor says he was, but they ended it with these overrides. Story over. There may be a few lawsuits to come on that, and I know that the AG is getting involved as well. Okay, so this is kind of a historical graph that I like to keep around. They're hard to find But that was last year's budget number of 10 billion there at the end. Kind of show you the historical nature of the legislature. Last year, 10 billion was a historical figure. This year, it's 13.2. Another historical figure on the state's budget with a lot of savings, with a few $1 billion in savings, which is a great place to be for the state. There's a lot of people expecting tax cuts. For this audience, grocery sales tax was a huge issue we've been dealing with over the years. We think we found the formula for it, but the House and Senate could never agree on a grocery sales tax or a lot of big tax cuts. But that was the bill, House Bill 1004X. X means special session bill. That's what the X always means. So the theme of this little presentation really is, and I know that OML, they send out their little newsletter on all the bills they want to talk about specifically on municipal issues, but I kind of wanted to stress here that economic development was the huge winner of this particular session. 180 million in the Perform Fund. Those were two bills put together to create that, but one created the Perform Fund, the other one funded it. But this was done for the solar panel manufacturer that came in to east side of Tulsa. Enel announced that in this last spring that they're going to start bringing that stuff home instead of importing those panels. That's kind of going on all across the country. And so Oklahoma was a huge winner there. They also did a $38 million water infrastructure bill to fund that plant and others coming in and kind of develop that park that they were working on. 145 million for site improvements through the LEAD Act. The LEAD Act was created last year. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago. That particular money is to entice the Panasonic EV battery manufacturer to build their second plant at the Mid-America Industrial Park in Mays County, northeast Oklahoma. That's not official. It's just putting some money on the table to pre-fund the LEAD Act, which is basically a hybrid of quality jobs for the mega site developers, or they're trying to go after those mega sites. 30 million for the film incentive. There was a lot of people hoping that that number would go up, but the good news is it didn't go down. The films it's a growing industry in this state. In fact, just a couple months ago, just down the road, they were filming for about a week at the Midway on 81, Twister 2. And so there were all kind of trucks around that building for several days. It was pretty interesting. They had it all decorated up. It looked actually really nice, and then they took away some of their specialty signs for the movie that they wanted in the movie. But anyway, that's going on all over the state. I can tell you for certain there are investment groups out there that want to put film studios in Oklahoma. And I've talked to one of those in particular. Everyone's looking at Oklahoma for that. Obviously, Oklahoma City, Tulsa are good candidates for that, but that's been a success story with the old Cox Center with Prairie Surf. They've showed everyone it can be done. So that's kind of going to be the next stage of development, is maybe bringing in some big studios. Franchise tax elimination, that was probably I think the only tax relief that we saw, which was probably a great item for economic development. The commerce budget, in that particular House Bill 1007, special session bill, they got a $36 million increase. Well, actually, 36 million total, $11 million increase. They're going to do some GIS mapping. They have a program. I don't know exactly what they're going to be doing, but that was a line item in the budget to fund that. Another line item was $200,000 to attract new agriculture industry companies. That's kind of an initiative in commerce. Hey, let's focus on growing ag companies and bringing them to Oklahoma instead of having a lot of those show up.
What
north.
act eliminated the franchise tax?
I don't have a bill number on that. I think it just said elimination. I don't have a bill number on there.
Okay. Well,
I can
that-
get it for you.
Yeah, that'd probably be good.
Okay.
You know, cities get franchise tax.
Okay. We'll look into that.
Okay,
All right. Hopefully that was just the state's portion?
let's hope so.
Okay.
I think
That's a-
so, because no one said
Okay,
anything.
all right,
Okay,
all right.
very good. Thank you.
We'll definitely look into that.
Proceed with the commerce.
Okay, unless that was a misstep on my part.
No, I'm
but-
sure it's not.
Okay, all right. So in that item for commerce, there was 10 million for Murray State College for a gunsmith technology degree program, taking it to a 4-year degree. They're building some, adding on a building for that particular degree. It's kind of a revolutionary degree that a lot of states don't have. So they were grateful to build that program. That was a kind of a big ask, and they came through with it. On probably 2 items that were kind of bad news, maybe on the economic development front, no closing fund appropriations. And, you know, that's come out, was always a nice account to draw on if you have a business coming into Oklahoma, to be able to call the governor's office, state leadership, and say, hey, what can we do to close this with some incentive money? And they didn't make any appropriations to that account this year. Another one was no PREP fund appropriations. PREP was created last year and to help prop up some of the industrial parks in the rural areas. That was the account that was created because you had the LEAD Act created for Mays County for the battery plant manufacturer trying to lure Panasonic here, and all of the rural representation at the Capitol said, well, what about us? And that's where the PREP fund came from. They appropriated it last year, but you know, at least the account is still there. That's probably going to be an account that the economic development world says, hey, let's fund it and continue to build up our industrial parks in the rural areas. So this is a big ticket item. First time monumental rural housing through House Bill 1031. $265 million appropriated to it. Rural housing and home builder stability. Creates the Oklahoma Housing Stability Program to provide loans to incentivize construction of low-income housing, granting preference to federally declared disaster areas. I know during the month of June into July, possibly continuing right now, I haven't looked into it, but they are writing rules at the OHFA right now to administer this program. It's a brand new program, a lot of money, a lot of excitement. So it's probably one to keep an eye on if you're wanting to incentivize housing in the area. Workforce, this is a bill number I know by heart, 621. So there's a few bill numbers you just don't forget. In Oklahoma, as well as all over the states, there's a lot of federal money that comes in to have workforce programs. And you have everybody has a workforce program. You got Career Tech Systems, they got their workforce program. Department of Labor has their workforce programs. Commerce, I would go so far as say higher ed, a lot of different divisions within Oklahoma, but nobody really owns workforce. That was one of the big problems. And so with this bill, they created the Oklahoma Workforce Commission to coordinate programs and funds for workforce development in the state. Sounds like a great idea, and it is. There needs to be some organization. But there was some concern because the word privatization was used and whispered in the walls of the rooms of the Capitol, and you're going to coordinate this, and it could potentially be a private entity that helps coordinate it. That kind of activated some legislators to talk about it. It passed the Senate fairly easy, 34-10. It failed on the House side, 54-41. Was a kind of a little bit of a surprise. Maybe I shouldn't say that it was a complete surprise. I was surprised that it failed. Usually when things roll out on the floor, they're going to pass. Not in this case. But on second attempt, reconsideration, the House reluctantly passed it, quite honestly. But there does need to be some coordination of these programs and try to make these dollars go further, and so that there's not overlap between the Department of Labor and education facilities and things like that by doing the same thing, just coordinate the workforce education. Quality jobs, extensive duration of participation in Quality Jobs Program Act by businesses from 15 years to 30. That was a big ask. They did that during special session. Aeronautics, we're a big aeronautics community. We love the sound of freedom flying over our city every day. The aeronautics, Department of Aeronautics had 3 priority bills. Not well-versed on the Advanced Mobility Pilot Program. That's the first one. The second one is creates the Aero Student Pathways for Aerospace Careers and Education Program. Obviously, trying to have some workforce issues and get some curriculum out there to get people, students interested in aerospace. And then Senate Bill 782 basically renamed the Department of Aeronautics to Aerospace and Aeronautics Commission. So a little bit of rebranding. In today's world, spaceports are real. We have a spaceport in southwest Oklahoma or out there at Burns Flat. They've been promoting for decades. And so ever since Elon Musk took space travel private, it's a big deal. And so I think the industry has really caught on. Before I forget, I don't have a slide on this issue, but we're getting ready to do interim studies. And there's really not that many related to municipalities that I saw at first glance, but there is one specific that we need to be aware of, and that's Representative Newton, who comes into Garfield County. He's from Cherokee. He has an interim study studying groundwater. I talked to him about it, asked him what the issue was, and it has to do with the field that we pull our groundwater from. There was a landowner out there that filed 24 permits on the same piece of property, and it got the neighbors all excited as to how many permits, how many wells can you put on a piece of property. I don't know how big the property is. I'm only assuming it might be a quarter, 160 acres, might be a half section, I don't know. But he had multiple permits, and everybody was concerned as to how far he could go. So they're probably gonna pull in Water Resource Board and talk protocol. It's just something to keep an eye on. I'm not expecting anything wild to go on at this point, but you know, he's doing his due diligence to take care of some concerns that are out there with how many wells can you drill. One last item. I know that right now we're kind of experiencing a void as far as leadership with our economic developer in the area. This is a great time for you all to step in because that organization is funded by the city of Enid. Select Oklahoma is a relatively new organization that has rebranded. It was 2 economic development organizations, and they put them together a couple years ago and formed Select Oklahoma. And it represents all of the economic developers in the state. And our local Enid Regional Development Alliance are members of this organization. They're having their conference on economic development in August, well, today is August 28th through the 29th. It's in Oklahoma City at the Omni. This is the first time they've put it together since the whole COVID thing. Pre-COVID, there were 500 people who attended. They're looking at the same numbers already. There's already over 400 that have registered. And I would think it would be great if the city of Enid maybe sent a couple people to attend. The Senate is going to have an official meeting on their select committee on economic development on the first day. Tons of breakout sessions, site locators, which is kind of a great thing to get to know those people. They provide us a lot of projects. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there so that you all knew about this economic development conference. Any questions?
I have one
Yeah.
question. It's good to see you
Yeah, and I
again.
see you too.
On the Oklahoma housing field,
Yeah.
how will we be able to keep up with that and access information?
I think it would be as simple as just getting on their website and seeing what rules have come down. I'm sure, if those rules are done, they're just weeks old. But I think it'd be as simple as just going to their website and looking it up. Because it's a first-time program, it's a big program, it's the main thing that they're gonna be working on.
And it's 260-something million
Yeah.
statewide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be great to get our hands on some of that, or get a developer involved and figure that out, unravel that.
Okay.
All right?
On the 9/11 bill, 911 surcharge for cell phones.
Yeah.
That was sitting on
Yeah.
the governor's desk. Did he finally sign that yet or not?
Wow, I don't know. They were asking for an increase?
Yep.
I actually talked to the director of the 911. I don't know, I don't recall.
Yeah,
But,
because going back, I think, to your last update, it was
Yeah.
sitting on his desk waiting to be signed, and
Okay, I'll look into it. I know they were having some issues. I remember the office I was in when I ran into him and talked to him about it, and it was a big ask. Nobody likes fee increases. That's one of the problems, but I'll check into that,
thank you.
because that benefits us.
That benefits us tremendously.
Kurt, I've got two things.
Yeah.
The first one is the overall $13.2 billion.
Yeah.
And I remember just 2 years ago when we had 9 billion and
Yeah.
we were struggling and oil and gas was down. What exactly has happened, because our oil and gas hadn't come back strong, for us to go from 9 billion
I know.
to
I think-
13.2? Is it one of those magical pins again?
I think that's probably the tail end of some federal money coming in,
Okay.
post-COVID. I think that's probably the end of that. So, outside of our economy, it's doing great. I mean, we're growing, and money is, flying around. You know, that Department of Commerce, they're getting more calls than they've ever gotten. You know, it's unbelievable the number of calls they're getting for businesses wanting to expand in Oklahoma. And, but I think the big number is probably some of the federal funds post-COVID.
Okay. Then my second question, and I hadn't thought about it, it kind of goes along with what Carol was talking about, but part of our revenue here in the city of Enid and other municipalities around the state are like Suddenlink and their franchise agreements, but it's only on TV service, right, through their cable. And that's going down to the tune, and y'all can correct me, from $80,000 to $100,000 a year, because everyone's switching over to internet, which, according to the FCC, we get $0 from them, right?
Got it.
And everyone's streaming, and the subscriptions are going down.
Yeah.
So it's not just an Enid problem, it's a statewide issue that they're forgetting about. I mean, at one time, this was over 1 million, well, I don't know what it was at the height, but since I've been around,
Yeah.
it was over $1 million, and then next year it'll be down to $500,000.
Okay.
So we need to figure out, because technology's changing, but our revenue stream is going down.
Yeah.
So-
And you're talking specific to broadband?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have talked to Senator Langford.
Yeah.
He gave it to some of his people that do the analysis on it. They called back and said it's a state issue, which is ironic that it's the FCC, you know, but I've talked to our local representatives. I can't find anybody that will take that up, but it's a big deal to us.
Yeah. You have to knock on the door of AT&T and Cox. And then we have this broadband mobility office, or the new broadband office, to take some of that over $1 billion of federal money and disperse it to build our broadband network throughout the state. It's a good time to talk about it, if we're gonna be
Okay.
pumping
And we
money in.
can
Yeah,
do
let's
this
do
at
it.
another
Let's do it.
time. I
No.
just wanted to
Yeah.
bring that to your attention
Yeah,
and
yeah.
let's figure out a time because we, we just have so many limited
Yeah,
revenue
yeah,
opportunities.
yeah.
And now
Well,
they're taking one
And Gerald
away.
and I talked earlier today, now's the time to think of those ideas.
Okay.
Now is the perfect time to think of those ideas and get OML moving on them and just kind of pushing and prodding and building the coalition and push them forward.
Okay.
So, all right.
And I have a question on that. Do we still have do we have that effect when it comes to individuals purchasing goods online?
User tax?
Yes. Does it affect us the same way or?
That was a problem that was actually solved, I think, Representative Caldwell here locally, he authored that bill to fix those loopholes on collecting internet sales tax a couple of years ago. That was a big item. It took about 2 years to iron that out, but I believe he ironed it out. You should be collecting.
And I've seen that as a line item of
Yeah.
revenue on our budget book. So, can't tell you how much it was, but.
All right.
Kurt, I was just going to mention, since you mentioned the Office of Broadband, I don't know how well you know Mike Sanders, who
Very
heads that
well.
up.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be interesting to know if there's any projects in Enid that are going to benefit from any of that money. I know there's at least one company that's put in for a ARPA grant.
Yeah.
And so if you could get some visibility on that, that'd be good too.
Okay.
I think Mike Feeney used to be part of that committee. I
Yeah,
don't
he
think he's
did.
part of that
He did.
committee anymore.
Mhm.
So it'd be good to get some visibility.
Yeah. In fact, our local superintendent of our career tech is on that board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Dwight.
Well, maybe he's got-
Yeah,
maybe
he's the
he
guy
knows
to
where it's
talk
all
to.
going.
He got appointed by the governor to be on that board.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe that's right.
All right. Any other questions? Okay,
All
thank
right.
you. Kurt.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right. Item number 3.2, presentation on economic development, marketing, industrial recruitment, and the new industrial park. And Mr. Jones, Chris Jones.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm Chris Jones. I'm the COO at St. Mary's. For a little background information, Krista Roberts is the CEO. She's out of town this week, but she presented similar information last week to the ERDA and was kind of brought forward that thought it would be beneficial to present to you as well. So really I'm going to talk about state of healthcare nationally, within the state and local, and then maybe some of the challenges that we're facing and how the city might be able to help us with those, or just make you aware of what those are. So on here, just a general summary of the healthcare industry in Enid. We are blessed. We've got a lot of resources here. So 2 hospitals, that's not common in a city this size, but that is a good thing. Gives consumers an option. We've got the urgent care, 3 of those. We've got a surgery center, Great Salt Plains, which helps, it's a federally qualified health center, which helps serve the underserved, if you will, as well as the health department, of course. We've also got multiple providers, so employed by either entity and then independent. And we have long-term, short-term care. Between the hospitals, we have behavioral health. We have skilled nursing. We have wound care, a variety of specialty type services. And I will mention EMS. That's been something that there's been some recent discussions. We're trying to partner with the EMS providers in the city to help with some challenges that are affecting the EMS companies as well as our patients in the hospital. So they have had some challenges with staffing, which so have the hospitals and many other industries. But what that's created is some delays in transports, and we're just trying to work through what that looks like and how we can help them recruit providers and have better communication there. And a little bit about just healthcare and what it means nationally and within the community. So you can see here that it's the largest employer in the country and is projected to grow. About 2 million jobs over the next 10 years. Also a surprising number there are for each physician that's recruited to a community, it brings about $3 million in economic impact. So jobs to run the clinic, other things. So you think downstream of durable medical equipment, pharmacy, just the other secondary income and spending that comes along with that. So physician recruitment, as you can imagine, that's really become a challenge locally and nationally. And you can see there just the vast amount of, I guess, inquiries that physicians are getting while they're still in school. It used to be you could recruit a physician even 6 months from when they're ready to graduate their residency program. Now it's even 3 years out. We actually have signed a physician, a primary care physician for 2025, and we have 2 offers for physicians in 2026 right now on the table. So it's so incredibly competitive that you've got to get at them early, or you'll miss on the opportunity. There are some things that we can do locally, such as some governmental assistance for their student loans. That's another big topic. So I'm thinking back 10, 15 years ago, it was pretty normal to see docs $100,000, $200,000 in student loans. I've actually recruited physicians with $400,000 in student loans. So anything we can do on the student loan side, either through the state or through the hospitals, is really a big win. And then just some creative things that we're having to do. I would say almost all hospitals now are having a comprehensive package, and so it's student loans. As I said, we're recruiting docs several years out, so we're having to do stipends, sign-on bonus, commencement bonus, relocation bonus. All of those things are required to get a doctor to come. They're also driving up the cost of getting a physician to be there. So then a little bit, this is kind of more about Oklahoma, I guess. And so the first data point there, as you can see, is out of all the hospitals in Oklahoma, 24 out of the 157 are really at risk of closure. And you keep continuing to hear every year of smaller facilities, particularly very critical access rural hospitals, they're just not able to make it. So luckily us and Bass are not one of these, but what that means there is they're operating in the red and they have less than 60 days operating cash on hand, which means they're struggling to even pay their payroll and their bills. And it's a national issue, not just here in Oklahoma. Additional pressures on hospitals. So salaries and supplies, as you can imagine, over the last couple of years with COVID have just skyrocketed, up 15, 20%. There was a period during the height of COVID where hospitals were paying $200 an hour for an ICU nurse. $200 an hour, that's more than a physician. There were hospitals that were considering closing units because it was losing money, not feasible to do that. But there's nowhere else to send the patients, so they were forced to do those things. So healthcare is different than most industries, as you probably know, where if you have a restaurant and you're selling a hamburger and your prices go up for labor or supplies, you can just adjust your price. But in healthcare, you can't do that, right? So most of our reimbursement comes from CMS, so Medicare and Medicaid. Their rates are fixed. There's nothing you can do about it. And then most of the rest are managed care contracts, which are locked in for a number of years. And so we can't adjust as fast as cost can increase. So that's a real struggle. Most organizations, us included, we try to go back to the managed care payers, and by that I mean like Blue Cross and Humana, to try to ask for increases. And you might get small numbers like 3 or 4% over the next 3 years, but once again, it's not keeping up with the cost to provide the care. So that's a real struggle. And we'll talk a little bit about later maybe how you can help with that. Also, many healthcare workers are leaving the industry. So retiring completely or saying I'm too stressed out from all the COVID, so I'm gonna go be a school nurse instead of working in a hospital, things like that. There was just an article a couple weeks ago, and it was over 70% of leaders in a hospital have seriously thought about retiring or leaving the industry in the last year. So it's hard to find good help and train good help. It's just as hard to keep them. So difficulties there. So some of the things related to recruitment a lot of this kind of applies to the city as well, is quality of life. So it's becoming increasingly more important with physicians in the younger generation of a work-life balance. And so the things that the city are doing and the ERDA are on the right track, investing in the community, things like the soccer park. Most of the time we're bringing in physicians are from out of state. They don't know anything about Enid. And they're looking for those quality of life things. So the orchestra and activities and nightlife and shopping. I know there's discussions about, what do we do with the mall, things like that. So those are important, and the city is doing the right things. I would just say to continue that focus, to be thinking about not just regionally being a hub of industry and, economic driver for people wanting to come here to shop. But if you're not in the region, think, what does it take for someone out of state to want to move here versus another city? What are the things that they're looking for? Salaries, of course, we've talked about that. It's just increasingly more competitive, so you've got to pay more and more to get qualified candidates. On call, that really is related to physicians and specifically specialists. So if you think about some of these physicians, and if you're a neurologist or a pulmonologist or a neurosurgeon or something like that, and you're now focused on quality of life and your family and raising kids and doing those kinds of activities, you don't want the burden of being on call all the time, right? So if you come to a smaller community and you're the only specialist, you're on call 24/7. Versus, I could choose to go to a group in a big city and maybe I'm one of 12 or one of 15 surgeons or something like that, and my call responsibility is much less. So that's part of a driver of more younger physicians when they're finishing their residency or joining larger practices in larger communities. So you're seeing like a group effect. So one of the things we're having to do to get around that is be creative. So we're doing things like increased use in telemedicine to supplement those. Also partnerships with other organizations so they can provide backup coverage or backup call. So those are some strategies there. Affordable housing, that's a big one. We actually have had, during the height of COVID, when we were trying to get agency nurses, we had nurses that declined coming here even though the pay was competitive because the cost for their temporary housing was too high or there weren't enough options. We have many of our staff that come from out of town. Some work 7 on, 7 off shifts. Some will work 2 or 3 days in a row and want to stay. We have physicians that are part of a group and they'll maybe come and work 12 days out of a month. So they need intermittent housing, but they don't want to buy a house. And I know there was a recent housing study, but I would just encourage you guys to continue to support that of looking for short-term, either cheaper by the day, or some of this kind of long-term where we're by the month or maybe by the year, to give better options to encourage some of our staff to be able to have options. It's just very limited options right now. Schools, so that's something that the city, I think, does a fantastic job on. It's part of the reason why I chose to move to this community was due to the education system. So public schools having additional, private options, but specifically secondary education and Autry, the VOTEC program. It's an absolute strength for this community, and we rely on that for recruitment. You think about a lot of those medical fields that come through there, so nurses and lab techs and phlebotomists and x-ray techs. It's a recruitment tool for us that helps us find staff. They come here, either they're from the region, they go to school, they want to stay, or they come to school and they learn to love it and they want to stay. We take students from all kinds of education institutions, so that's a big win. I would say, continue to stay focused on that partnership. And then I mentioned kind of the change in the care practice models. So some of that's the change of shifts where docs now want to work 4/10s or they want to work part-time or they need some half days or just a whole variety of creative things. In the past, that really was not ever discussed. It was just pretty much expected. If you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 kind of scenario, but hospitals and organizations have really had to be creative because specifically the younger generation is asking for unique things that we've just not ever done before. Like I said, different shifts, different hours, different days of the week, all kinds of creative things. So we're definitely open to that and have to evaluate that and think outside the box different than what we've always done before. So kind of what are some things that the city can do? Talked a little bit about Enid as a regional hub. One thing that kind of comes to mind is so downtown Enid, there's been a lot of focus on that, and I would agree that that's becomes kind of the heart of the city, and you want to keep that vibrant and alive. What I would say also is to don't forget about the corridors of coming into the city. So as I said, many of our recruits know nothing about Enid, nothing about Oklahoma, and they're coming in from Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and we actually have had candidates before comment on their very first impression as they're coming into the city was not very positive, but then they're pleasantly surprised once they get into the city. So I think just don't lose the focus also on, from an outsider coming into the city, what it looks like as you're entering into the city. So whether that's investments in cosmetics or roads or paint or cleaning up the brush or whatever that may mean, I think that's something that helps create a good first impression there. Talked about the housing options, anything we can do for that. I know there's a housing project going on downtown. I think that's a fantastic idea. We need more of those types of projects. Quality of life. So the soccer park, that was another big thing for me and for my son who's active in soccer. Those are the kinds of things that bring some life to the city. So the Stride Center, the baseball stadium, there's a lot of really good things going on here that you should be proud of. So continue those sorts of projects. Recruit businesses and industry. So the industrial park, there's a lot of discussion about that on the ERDA board, about getting grants and funds and how do we continue to move forward that, and maybe having a mega site, one of the largest in the state, where we can bring in really big businesses. And I know you already know the economic impact of that and the importance of doing that, but from the hospital standpoint, those types of industries are critically important for the survival of a hospital. So small businesses are great. They help provide some traffic, but the big businesses, they also provide higher paying jobs with insurance that helps the hospital with our payers. So if you think about it, Medicare, Medicaid, they're 60 to 65% of our reimbursement. We don't cover, that didn't even cover our cost. So we then rely on the managed care contracts to help us pay our bills and stay afloat. So anytime you can bring in a new business that has jobs that provide insurance, that's a huge win for the healthcare industry. So any efforts there are definitely appreciated. And something that's also kind of unique here is, and you may not think about it, it's just the professionalism of the website. So Krista mentioned this at the other presentation, and as I thought back, when I was job searching for a community I wanted to go to and what hospital or what company I wanted to work for, there were many that just after reviewing the website, I said, bad impression, I don't think they have their act together. I will say Enid and the ERDA, impressive website. So continue to invest in that. It may seem silly, it does make a difference. And the first impression from a provider who maybe is wanting to move from Lincoln, Nebraska, I assure you they're going on your website. Today we interviewed a lab director. He commented, I was on the city's website, I was on the hospital's website, I was on the ERDA's website. I want to know if this is a town I want to live in. So it is important, it does make a difference. So continue to kind of also stay on top of that. But it probably is something that's not on your radar, but it does make a difference. So that is what I had, but I am happy to answer any questions, take questions.
Perhaps you can just speak for St. Mary's, but Are we in shortage of any specific doctors, any type of fields?
Yes, I feel like we're in pretty good shape with primary care, although most of them are booked out. And as I said, we have some additional providers coming for primary care that we've signed, and our goal is to add some every year. Specifically, our shortage, I would say, would be some of the specialists. So I'll start with what we're really stable in, and that would be orthopedics and cardiology. We just signed an additional cardiologist, so we're going to be good there. General surgery, we're good. OB, we're good. Where we're struggling a little bit is pulmonology, nephrology, neurology, neurosurgery, those types of limited specialties, and we have recruitment efforts open for all of those. We do have some creative things that we're bridging the gap. So we have some telemedicine solutions to cover some holes there. Like nephrology, we have one, but we need two. Neurosurgery, we've partnered with OU to start bringing a neurosurgeon to town. His first clinic was a week ago, and it was a full clinic. For now, his plan is once a month based on volume, but we clearly see that that's going to grow. And we're also trying to partner with them for a co-recruitment, if you will. So there are some gaps in some of those specialists, and it's not unique to us, I don't think. As I mentioned, it's increasingly hard to find those specialty physicians in medium or smaller sized towns.
Sure.
Because they all want to be part of larger groups. But
How are we doing on physical therapists?
We're good, actually.
Okay.
You have a special interest in PT?
Well, my brother's a physical therapist, and he lives in Seattle, and I'd like to get him home.
Okay, we'll take his number.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually just recently expanded our physical therapy clinic to add injured athlete, which is kind of a sports medicine type focus to it. But there are certain areas where, as someone leaves, we have an ability to recruit. Nurses, we are doing much better. We have found, and I think a lot of hospitals are finding, that there was a huge exodus of nurses during COVID. They all were doing the travel because of the big money.
Yeah.
Now that's died down. They're all starting to come back. So we have recruited many of those back. Lab comes to mind. We lost 6 or 8 of our lab techs for a variety of reasons, and almost all of them came back full time. So we are seeing some success over the last, I'd say, year to date. We're hiring more than we're losing, and we're hiring back staff that left. So we feel pretty good about that. That's all I have.
One thing I'd ask you, and then I just wanted to make a comment after that, but what is it that Stillwater's doing that maybe we're not? Is it because they have one hospital, but every time I go by over there, blocks and you can't get a parking spot?
A few things. So one, yes, one hospital town. If you just look at population, they're pretty similar to us, right? But if we combined the 2 hospitals together, you also could have some efficiencies on resources. So that's one. Also due to the college population, so that's misleading. That's not included in their city population.
Right.
I don't know it because I'm new to the state, but I'm guessing it's 35,000 or something, at least 30,000. There's a lot of additional people that have needs. Also, they get some additional grants and funding federally and through the state for some of the things that they're doing that we don't.
Okay.
They're a not-for-profit and we're a for-profit, so that limits some of those grants.
Okay. And then the last thing I'd say is when I heard this same report that you just gave several weeks ago at the ERDA meeting, I was amazed that each doc generates additional income through additional employees, 17 employees and $3.1 million. I think sometimes we go out and we search all these for businesses to come in that will generate dollars. A couple docs will do what probably several small businesses would. But then I go to this sheet right here, your last sheet, and I look down through there. I think it's so critical as we, as a city and as a commission, decide where we're gonna spend our dollars, that everything we do has such a drastic effect on the medical field's ability to recruit. And, just the one thing right down here on us going out and recruiting the industry, which we all think about that, but getting those companies that are large enough that have health insurance that they provide, and what a difference in your ROI that will make at the end of the day. But I just put a check on every one of these that we currently work on or we could do better, and it's every single one on that page. I go up to the quality of life. As we sit around, we decide whether or not to put more money into the Stride Center. It's those things that do have value that aren't going to be, they're not going to be a dollar for dollar. It's going to be whether or not a doc and his family will come to this area. So I just found it very interesting, and it kind of reinforced and some things that I already knew and I already thought, but I found it very interesting and just how important it is that our city creates that environment that makes it easier for our medical field and other fields to be able to recruit.
Yeah, it's very common in cities that schools and healthcare are in the top, usually two, but definitely top 5 businesses, employers in the town, and all the salaries and the taxes and those things. But the decisions you make, you don't always think about how that impacts a hospital, but as you say clearly, they're very aligned. And so there has to be a good partnership for the things that you're doing, understanding it impacts more than if you bring in a big business, you're probably thinking taxes and income and housing and all those, but it has a much deeper effect than that, for sure.
Like a park pays value back, even though it's not in dollar for dollar. So.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, any other comments or concerns, anybody? If not, thanks, Chris. That was very, very enlightening. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. 3.3, update on Enid Sister City. Laura.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. This is going to be brief and a little different than originally planned. We have been a sister city with Niger Colo Clinic or Colo Africa for quite a few years. The first that we can find record of was in 2004 when a medical team from Enid went to Africa, and the city did a proclamation and celebrated that action. We've had at least another one, maybe a couple more. We had a little trouble finding some records, but in 2016, Colo sent us a proclamation thanking us for our involvement in what we had done there. And then the third one this January, I was going with a team and was on staff and was asked to see if the city would renew our sister city, and we did. And we had another one planned, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But I wanted to just back up a little bit and just explain that Hosanna Institute of the Sahel was actually founded here in Enid. A gentleman from Niger was here. I believe he was a Walmart employee at the time, a Walmart supervisor, had a feeling that he needed to go home to Niger, Africa, and give back to his own people. And so he started it with the help of a lot of churches, people, the city. Like I said, the 2005, one of the earliest trips there on a medical clinic. Some of the doctors from Enid went. Enid just really jumped on to this idea of doing humanitarian work there. And the program is religious. Hosanna is a religious-based entity, but humanitarian first. They believe people have to have clean water. There's a very small percent of people in Niger who have clean water. Health, there's an even smaller amount of people who have access to health care. One large hospital and a couple of clinics in the entire country. Education, all these things are limited there. And so humanitarian is important, and even though, as I said, it's a religious entity, they feel like you have to feed them, clothe them, educate them before you try to cram Christ down their throats or tell them the love of Christ. You have to show them the love of Christ. And so I respect that about the entity, even though we still take the water drilling and medical trips and are still working on that. With that, though, just to make sure you know a little bit about it, because you will continue to hear about it over time, there have been a lot of changes in just the last week. In the middle there, you'll see the brown is where Niger is. It's called West Africa. It's kind of in the middle, though. Niamey is the capital city. It's in that little panhandle part. Kolo, which is actually our sister city, is about 40 minutes outside of Niamey. And the area around it, on the one side is Burkina Faso, below is Benin, and above is Mali. You've probably heard of some of those communities even more, or countries even more than you've heard of Niger. But they've all been hit in the last few years by a lot of extremist, terrorist activity. Niger has been kind of the holding ground that has not been taken over or turned over to extremists. Countries like the US and France have really relied on Niger as a place that we could go to, have some military and try to keep some stability and peace in the area. But a week ago, last week Wednesday, there was a coup in the government, and so the planned trip in August is not going to happen. You can read more about it online. I absolutely do not want to talk about the political side of things. I just want you to know that we had planned to do this. We are still sister cities. We hope for a peaceful end to what's happening there, and that we can try again to bring the governor and mayor and the people who are going to come. So really, I would just say to you to pray for peace in this region. Look up and research, and if you know and have met some of the people that have come from there and visited here in the past, continue to think of them. But really just that, how blessed we are. We are here in Enid, we are safe, we have water, we have health. Even when we're divided, we don't have to worry about a coup of our government and endangering our food source and people dying of starvation. And so I just want to thank you that you were going to be involved in it. Ask that you keep it in mind, and hopefully soon again we'll try it again. And God bless Enid, Oklahoma. If you have any questions for me, I'll answer them, but that's it.
Yakuba's an American citizen, right?
He has an American passport,
Okay.
yeah. And both his children are.
So they may or may not still be coming?
So you all have pictures of the mayor, the governor, the doctor, and that in your original, what I did a week ago before this happened, what I had already done. I took them out of what I put here because I don't want their pictures on a video or anything that might be on the internet, because it could endanger them. Just having that American connection could endanger their lives. And so I don't want to say too much about any of them, just because I don't want to put any of them in danger. But that family, the missionary family that we have worked with this whole time, who had that plan, the reason I didn't say his name earlier was because they were actually out of the country and in Germany for some medical appointments, and so they can't get back in. And they have no idea when they'll be able to go back in. Possibly not for years. I mean, however long this takes, they won't be going back, because right now they can't go back. So they are actually still coming, the family, not the others that were on your first PowerPoints that you saw. They can't get out. And also the government officials are part of, it's different than our government, where if our president, something happened with our president today, Governor Stitt is still our governor because we elected him. But theirs are all tied, and so the mayor and the governor that were going to come, since the president has been ousted and that party, then they are out. So they are no longer governor and mayor of where they were governor and mayor of. And so it is called a republic, but it's a little different than ours. It's definitely of concern, and again, it's just, I'm glad we have what we have and our freedoms and our rights to disagree, but still not fear for our lives and our children's lives, and everything shut down. So they will be here if you want to meet with them. the family will be here. Anything else?
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Thank you. We will, gonna adjourn and we'll be back at 6:30. Dead spot. I don't know.